Before we get started in that, if you could just share with us a little bit about who you are. I'm sure not everybody knows who you are, and what you do in Kenya.
Yeah, we're your missionaries, Holly and Fred. We have a family of four serving in Kisumu, Kenya, off of Lake Victoria. So Fred pastors our church of about 150 members, and we also have a sponsorship program and work with a group of widows of about 60 widows that we work with to
Mhm.
create projects with them and disciple them and support them in any way that we can.
Um, we're going through the gospel or through the book of Ruth in the Old Testament for Lent, and wanted to look at a little bit different angle each week on Wednesdays, and that's what we're doing tonight. And wanted to ask you a little bit about what it looks like to be a widow in Kenya, because in Old Testament times, gender roles and society and culture looks a lot different than the American life that we live today. And the life that we live today in America looks a lot different than some other places in the world. So, Fred, if I could just ask you,
Yeah.
give us a general overview of gender roles in Kenya. Like, how do people get married? What's the value that's given to married life and having children and those sorts of things? In the Bible, those were very important. So, what does it look like for Kenyan men and women today?
Well, first of all, I want to begin by saying that, to or to get married or to marry, is really, really a high value. It is an addition, a value to every human being. So when these people are married, there is that respect they are given, both from the parents, the parents from the lady side and from the husband side. There is that respect they are given. They have now graduated, like, being or having a family.
Sure.
Now when they are married now, there are some gender roles. As a husband, there is that role that is given to him as to provide security and to protect the family. Family, I mean the husband, the wife, and together with the children, if there could be children. So,
Okay.
and also to provide the basic needs. Like build a house, you search for money, bring clothes, and etc. While
Sure.
when you turn to the other side of, I mean, the wife, her duty is to make sure that things are placed well in the house, like, fetching water and, bringing in food, going to the
What's so
market.
funny, Holly?
That, it's funny. It's funny. That's what.
I don't fetch water.
No, she doesn't do that. She does not do that. I'm talking in the village.
Okay,
Cultural.
okay,
Yeah,
sure, sure. So
that,
different from living in the city where you guys live.
yeah,
Sure.
something. Then I would say that being in a family, there is that high value. You are valued everywhere you go. You can now sit, I mean, everywhere. I mean, uh, with the elderly, you can also give your view.
Okay.
Unlike you are not married or you've not married, no one will listen to you. Something like that. So
Interesting.
that, yeah, there is that honor. Oh, he's married. He's married. So we can listen to him, especially when there is a kind of a gathering and you want to give your view. You will be given that chance because you understand what family is. You understand what it entails to govern, a home, something like that. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so there's a lot of respect that goes along with getting married that really signifies something significant about your ability to speak into issues, as you mentioned, and be respected
Right.
for your opinions.
Right.
And then soon after marriage, about 9 months after marriage, in I would say 100% of Kenyan homes comes a baby.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
So family
It's
planning
true.
would be
Very
something
true.
that takes place after the first child, but the first child would be a sign of that unity in marriage. So they would um, never try not to have a baby right
Oh,
away.
yeah.
That would
Yeah.
always
That's
be
that's very
that's
true.
the first step of a marriage, and
Okay.
uh, that is
And
also when you're not considered like marriage. You're considered someone, but people still might call you a boy if you don't have a child yet. Like you
Really?
become a man once you have a child.
And in a similar way in the Old Testament, it would have been just as difficult to go that long without children. It seems like there's a lot more women in Kenya that are widows than there are men that are widowers. And I know that you guys talk a lot about the problem of HIV in Kenya. Is there anything related to HIV and disease that might be the reason that there's a lot more women who lose their husbands than men who lose their wives?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, polygamy is very common in a lot of different tribes in Kenya, and because they have more than one wife, they become more active, and the more active you are, the more power the disease has over your body, and you become a lot more sick, and it develops into AIDS a lot quicker. And just like in an American context, women are often to go to the doctor before men. So men get sick faster, and they don't take care of their body as well as women, and they get sick, and they don't take their medicines properly, and they end up passing away, leaving 2 or 3 wives behind.
Okay, so then by leaving 2 or 3 wives behind, it's like one man dies and there's 3 widows now.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting. And I think the other thing I think you've shared before is that when a wife passes away, the husband can freely
Right.
go and get remarried. But with what you've talked about with the culture, it's kind of like the Old Testament where the wife is kind of owned, so to speak, by her husband's family, so she can't leave unless can somebody redeem her, kind of like what we're going to be learning about in the next chapter of Ruth. Can a husband come and basically buy his right to marry a widow?
Widow inheritance is very common in Kenyan culture. So after a man dies and leaves a widow behind, I would say in most situations that woman gets inherited by a far relative or another man in the village. Sometimes this man will marry this widow as a second or third wife also, but this man will be there to essentially provide or protect that woman, like Boaz was doing. But unfortunately, human nature takes its course, and it's not a protection, but it's more of access to her.
Okay,
I,
got
I
it.
I wanted to put something or to add something in by saying that culturally, you'll find that this husband, despite of him having 3 wives, and due to the good relationship that he's been having with the brothers, he can just call them, just call the other brothers, when he's sickling, and just giving them like instruction in a form of a will that when I die, you, my brother so and so, you take so and so, something like
Okay,
that.
so
So
like he would actually will, like we would say that you get my car and you get my house and you get my watch. He would actually call and say you get to marry my first wife and you get to have my second wife and that
that's
kind of a
right.
thing. Wow.
That's
Wow. Yeah, that's
so
radically
fun.
different than what we would experience here.
And that is not taking place in this marriage.
That's good to clarify. So Fred, you have no right to will your wife away.
He has not willed me off to any of his
No,
brothers.
no, no. Well,
Okay.
culturally,
Yeah.
Culturally, yes, got it.
yeah.
What does it look like for a widow in the city? You guys live in Kisumu, versus somebody who is widowed in the village, which is a more remote culture. What does it look like to be a widow in both of those settings?
Yeah, I wanted to begin by saying that a widow in the village or in the rural area has more trouble or problem because you find that there is no uh, this like business opportunity around them since they are in the village. They are
Okay,
left there with their husband after death, so they are just lying there. I mean, they don't know what to do. A widow in the village, there is this, they find themselves in a community, you
sure.
know, that one kind of gives them support, because this is because when a wife is married in our culture, it is not for one man. It's like she belongs to that family.
Women in Kenya are often widowed at a very young age. I would say to hear of a woman who becomes a widow in the States at a young age it happens, but it's a very rare occurrence. Where here, if a woman becomes a widow at 25, 30, 35 years old, it's not surprising. It happens quite often, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that would be the biggest difference is, I guess in my mind, I always think of a widow as an older, elderly woman, where I've seen a lot of faces of widows. A couple weeks ago, I was just with some friends and I looked around and half of them were widows and they were around my age. I was really struck by that,
Yeah.
that so many can be at such a young age with young families being left alone. Another thing is savings or finances that aren't there. You find in the U.S. we have some different systems applied for savings accounts or life insurance or different ways to help women. Where here it's very casual support groups. It's nothing formal set in place of how to help them after their husband has passed. That's why we try to do a lot of support for these widows, because their husbands maybe left them with the house that they had, but nothing more than that. One year when our mission trip came, we gave the Kenyan widows in the village a pot for cooking, and one of the widows said, "I haven't bought a pot since my husband died." And this was a very old woman who probably has been a widow for 20 years, but she haven't had enough money to buy a pot for cooking.
Wow.
Since her husband died. Another thing would just be, not like I mentioned before, that widow would not be able to remarry. If her husband had paid dowry before he passed away, that woman would be kind of owned by the husband's families. Like Fred said, that woman belonged to that family, not just to one man. So even if that one man isn't there, she's still owned there because the family paid dowry to her family. So she doesn't have that freedom to leave the family or to remarry.
Sure. Well, and we'll see that a little bit in Ruth, as we haven't gotten there yet, but we've just met Boaz, and we find that he has a legal right to redeem Ruth and her family, and in a similar way, buy her the rights to her to be part of his household from the the household of Elimelech. So there are some similarities there. So then Fred, what hope does the gospel of Jesus bring to a widow living in that culture of Kenya? What hope does the gospel bring?
Despite of their husband dying, it's a fact, they're dead. But there is someone, God himself, is now calling himself to be their husband. That is the biggest hope. Jesus Christ, So we have to tell them or to show them Jesus Christ as their now sole and main hope for them, So, like, for example, I've seen, despite of them losing their husband, but God can still provide for them in a very unique way. God provide even security, for them. Security, which was one of the duties of the husband who was there, but now is not there, is now provided by God himself. So as people of God, when we are preaching to them, we show them all these things. So they feel that there is still hope, when we talk to them.
That's awesome. It sounds like the way the gospel works in the life of a widow is she's been taught by her culture to find her value and worth in her husband and to be provided for by her husband, and all of those things get shattered when he passes away, and the gospel says that God wants to redefine where you get value and redefine your worth and redefine where you have hope to be provided for, and then God uses the church like yours to actually go be the hands and feet of that providing, of that hope. That's amazing. I feel like half of us here tonight at St. John's are probably ready to hop on a plane and help be that hope in the hands and feet of God with you. So,
Welcome.
well, thank you so much for sharing, and I know we'll conclude with a short video. I know you have a widow in your culture. There in your culture, you have a widow in your community who was recently widowed and recently found hope in the gospel. So let's watch that now, and then we'll come back and I'll ask if you guys have any prayers we can pray for, because we're going to be going into a time of prayer, and we would love to be thinking about you guys while we do that. So let's watch.
My name is Milka Nekesa from Bungoma, Kenya. I'm Bukusu tribe. I got married in Kisumu to a Luo man from another tribe. I got married in 2010. We came to live in his hometown. In 2011, God blessed us with a handsome son. We call him Harrison. In 2014, my husband fell sick. We couldn't get the cause of the sickness, and sadly he passed away. After he died, that's how life started being tough. It was hard for me to accept his death. Life was so dark. We couldn't survive without him. So I thought, God, it's me who is following. I'm going to die next, and we're going to leave our son alone. Rumors will spread whenever I'm walking, like, that is the lady that husband died, that is the widow. Those one will bring the pain, the bad memories of losing a husband. I lacked that self-esteem. I saw my life as not worthy, but God gave me strength. The pastors, the church, friends, they all encouraged me. I was reminded that the Lord is the father of the orphans and the husband to the widows. I promised the Lord after the funeral that I will serve him. I will be there whenever he will call me. Now I can translate the sermon in the church. I'm a leader in Awana and in small groups, and I'm still standing firm. Since my husband died up to now, we've never gone to bed without food. I'm able to pay my rent where I live, and God is still faithful to us. And I'm blessed to serve the God who provides, the God who protects, and the God who guides us. Amen.
Thank you guys for sharing and for asking Milka to do that. What a blessing to hear the hope that she's found in the gospel through what you guys have been doing. Before we let you go, I just want to ask, is there anything we can pray for you on?
Yeah, in November, our ministry recently celebrated its 10-year anniversary. So Good News Community Center has been around in Kenya for 10 years, and
Wow.
we've really seen God's faithfulness over the past 10 years.
Praise God.
Yeah, and during that same time of celebrating the anniversary, Fred was ordained and appointed to our main church, which is the church we've been talking about. And I think just as we step into that role, we've been there for 3 months now.
So 3 months, let me just clarify, 3 months as lead pastor of the church, which is you were an associate pastor, but now you are the lead pastor there, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're honored for that position, and
Yes.
Fred is really doing a great job and stepping up in a lot of areas that the church needed to be stepped up in. So just, I think, prayer for wisdom as we do that, and that God would direct our steps, and that he would just lead us and give us discernment, and that we would know who to help and when to help, and where to bring the gospel. We really want to focus on evangelism this year, and that's why we talked about going into the schools and doing a lot of school ministry. We are blessed that we have that opportunity to preach the gospel in the schools. So just that God would give us favor in what he wants us to focus on as we take that leadership role. I think that would be our biggest prayer request right now.
Okay. All right. Well, we will enter into a time of prayer right now, and we will be praying for that. We'll also pray for your family, for you, Fred, and your leadership, both in your home and in your community. Holly, for everything that you're doing. Lucy, as well as Eliana, and all those who come in contact. I just, on behalf of St. John's, halfway around the world, I just want to really thank you guys so much for taking the time to share these things with us, and I'm sure we will talk again soon. All right?
We should.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.